67 years old, and I still check the locks twice before bed. My late wife Robin used to shake her head at me for it. "Bernard Holt," she'd say. "You'd hear a feather land on cotton wool." She wasn't wrong, so when my phone lit up at 12:19 inches the morning, on a wet Tuesday in June, I was already sitting up before the screen, even registered who was calling. I live now, I should say. Still haven't got the hang of that on the edge of Havelock North. Hawke's Bay. The kind of street where the hedges are tall and the neighbors wave but don't pry. Quince trees in the front yard. A view of Te Mata Peak on clear days. The kind of place where nothing urgent ever happens. I looked at the screen. "Callum, welcome to Silver Verdict. Pull up a chair, make yourself a cuppa, and settle in." Because the people in these stories were given every opportunity to do right by the people who trusted them. They simply chose otherwise. Stay with me. You'll want to hear how this one ends. My youngest son had not called me after 10 o'clock at night since the evening Robin was taken to hospital for the last time. Callum Holt does not do late-night calls. He does Sunday afternoon check-ins, text messages on my birthday that arrive at exactly midnight because he sets a reminder, and handwritten cards at Christmas with a specific memory from that year written inside. He is methodical in the way that only people who have learned hard lessons about disorder tend to be. He has been a forensic accountant with the Serious Fraud Office for 11 years. He finds the money that people try to hide, and he follows it until it stops moving. He has never once called me at midnight. I answered before the second buzz. "Cal." His voice was flat, measured, the kind of steady that costs something to maintain. "Dad, don't say anything yet. Just listen. I need you to do exactly what I tell you. And I need you to do it right now, without asking why." I sat straight. "So it's, Dad." One word. He said it the way he said it when Robin was in that hospital bed and the doctors had pulled him aside and he'd had to come back into the room and tell me something he didn't want to say. That tone, the one that meant the situation had already moved past the point where my feelings could be factored in. "I'm listening," I said. "Go to the study. Don't turn the light on. Lock the door from the inside. Do not use the landline. And Dad," his voice dropped. "Half a register, do not say a word to Phillip." The room dropped 10 degrees. Phillip Stroud. My son-in-law. My daughter Nadia's husband of 11 years. The man who had been staying in my spare room for the past 5 days because, and this was what he'd told me, the firm he worked for was relocating their Napier office, and the rental he and Nadia used as a base when they were down from Auckland was being repainted. He'd said it with that easy smile of his. "You don't mind, do you, Bernard? Just a few days. I'll be out of your hair before the weekend." I'd said, of course. I'd made the man lamb chops. I'd let him help himself to the good whiskey on the shelf above the fireplace. "Callum," I whispered. "You're frightening me." "Good," he said, and something in his voice cracked very slightly at the far edge. "Be frightened. Be quiet. And go. Now." I did not ask another question. I moved through my own house in the dark the way you move through a place you know entirely by feel. 14 steps down the hall, past the framed photo of the kids at Kaikoura, the one where Nadia is laughing at something off camera and Callum looks like he's trying not to, past Robin's needlepoint that still hangs beside the linen cupboard. A house is built with timber and stone. A home is built with love alone. She finished it the year before she got sick. I find it harder to walk past than I find her photograph, which probably says something about me I haven't worked out yet. Into the study. Lock on the door. Sat down in the chair behind the desk. I didn't know it yet, but I was sitting 8 meters from a secret that had been living in my house for 6 years. My study is a room Robin always said I used as an excuse to avoid people at Christmas gatherings. She was not entirely wrong. It has bookshelves on 3 walls, a desk that belonged to my father, a window that looks out onto the side passage between our house and the Hendersons' fence. I've worked at that desk for 22 years. I know every drawer, every groove in the wood, every shelf, and what sits on it. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I heard movement in the house. Slow footsteps. Careful. The kind someone makes when they believe the person they're sharing a roof with is asleep. The footsteps stopped outside the study door. I held my breath. Then they moved on. Past the study, past the bathroom, down the short hallway, toward the laundry. I shifted my chair. The study window faces the side passage. And if you sit at a certain angle, you can see the small utility window of the laundry, which faces the same direction. There's a sensor light on that side of the house. Robin had it put in after a possum got into the recycling 3 years running. The sensor light clicked on. Phillip Stroud was standing in the laundry. He was dressed. Not in pajamas. Not half awake. Dressed. Dark shirt. Dark trousers. Shoes. Even. As if he had never intended to sleep at all. He crouched beside the washing machine. I watched him reach behind it, both arms. And there was a scraping sound I could just barely make out through the glass. He came back with something flat and rectangular. A document wallet, the kind with a zipper and a rigid backing. He laid it on top of the machine, unzipped it, and opened it in the light of his phone's torch. I pressed closer to the glass. He turned pages, photographed several with his phone. Calm. Systematic. Not like a man doing something hasty, like a man completing a task that had been waiting for the right moment for a long time. I recognized the color of the papers inside. Cream. Heavyweight. The kind solicitors use. And then he reached in again and brought out a smaller envelope, and even from where I was sitting, through a window, in the dark, I could read the logo on the front of it, because I'd sat across a desk from that same logo in the offices of Fenton and Gregg on Karamu Road 8 years ago, while a solicitor explained the terms of my wife's estate to me in a voice designed to be kind. Fenton and Gregg, Robin's estate solicitors. I sat back from the window. My hands weren't working the way they should. I did the accounting later. Not then. Then I just sat in the dark and breathed and tried to keep the pieces from moving so fast I couldn't see them. Callum went to prison 9 years ago. That is not a sentence I say easily even now. He was 30 years old. He had just been promoted at the SFO. He was the kind of man who caught fraud, not committed it. The charge was misappropriation of client funds. The evidence was a series of transfers from a managed investment account that had been routed, on paper, through a shell company registered in Callum's name. The investigation moved in 6 weeks. The trial lasted 4 days. Callum had a barrister who I later came to believe was the wrong choice, though Callum himself insisted on something I didn't understand until much later. He said from the beginning that the shape of the case was wrong. Not the facts. The shape. The way a good forensic accountant speaks about a set of books that has been constructed to look honest. He served 19 months at Rimutaka. Came out quieter than he went in. Rebuilt his career. I still don't fully understand how, and eventually made it back to the SFO in a different role. One he has never fully explained to me. I assumed that was modesty or privacy. I know now it was neither. My phone buzzed. One vibration. A text. Still in the study? Where else? I typed back. Come out the side door. My car is at the end of the block. Leave the light off. He's still in the laundry. Callum's car was a dark blue Holden that looked like it hadn't been washed since before the last election. Parked half under a streetlight at the far end of Ormond Road. I crossed the front lawn in my slippers. I had not thought about footwear and got in the passenger side. My son looked like a man who had not slept in 2 days, which I would later learn was a conservative estimate. He was 40 years old, and he looked 48, and he looked more like his mother than he ever had. Her stillness, her way of not wasting energy on anything that didn't require it. He was in dark civilian clothes. No badge. No lanyard. Just Callum, with a manila folder on his lap and something behind his eyes that had been living there for a long time. We looked at each other. "Lamb chops," I said. He blinked. "Sorry? I made that man lamb chops, Callum." I gave him Robin's good whiskey. Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. "The shape where one used to live. I know, Dad. You could have told me sooner. I couldn't. And I heard it. The legal weight, the procedural weight, the weight of 9 years of patience, dressed up as moving on. I needed physical evidence. Everything before tonight was traceable but not actionable. I needed him to come to the wallet. I turned to face him. "You knew about the wallet. We've known it was in the house for 10 months. We suspected it was behind the laundry appliances, based on a partial image recovered from a phone he lost at a service station in Taupo in 2022. We couldn't get a warrant to search the property without exposing the surveillance. The cold outside had nothing on what was happening in my chest. "Talk," I said. He talked. 40 minutes. I did not interrupt once. Robin's estate had not been large. The house, a life insurance policy, a small share portfolio she'd built over 30 years, with the same determination she applied to everything she did. Combined value, around $380,000. Not a fortune. Enough to matter. Enough for someone to want more of it than was intended for them. The will Robin signed in 2007, in the offices of Fenton and Gregg on a Wednesday afternoon when she was between treatments and her hands were steadier than they looked, divided everything into 3 equal parts. Callum, Nadia, me, with a separate bequest of $12,000 to her youngest sister Auntie Vera in Dunedin, who Robin had been sending birthday cards to for 35 years without ever once forgetting the date. That was the will. The will that was used to settle the estate was not. Callum's share in the document that went through probate had been reduced to a nominal amount, $6,500, with the remainder consolidated into Nadia's portion, which meant Philip's portion, Phillip Stroud, who had positioned himself perfectly to ensure that while his brother-in-law was sitting in Rimutaka prison for something he did not do, the inheritance that should have come to him was quietly redirected to a joint account that Nadia had no independent access to. "How?" I said. Just the one word. There was a legal secretary at Fenton and Gregg. She's no longer there. She received a payment we believe in the range of $18,000, paid through a sequence of transactions we've traced back to a property trust registered in Philip's mother's name to substitute the filed document before it went to probate. The original was taken. Philip kept a copy. We think as leverage. Against Nadia, I said. Callum looked out the windscreen. In case she ever challenged the estate. In case she ever started asking questions about where the money actually went after probate. He had a document that could destroy him. And he kept it close enough to use as a threat, and far enough away that it couldn't easily be found. I sat with that for a moment. Phillip Stroud had hidden insurance against my daughter inside my house. He'd used the home where she grew up as the place to store the instrument of her own captivity. I filed that in the part of my mind that handles things I cannot afford to feel fully right now. And the fraud charge, I said. Callum exhaled through his nose. Constructed. Phillip was at university with a man who later became a compliance officer at a mid-tier investment firm in Wellington. Together they built a paper trail shell company. False transfer records, digital timestamps that looked authentic to a standard audit but had specific fingerprints we've since been able to identify. They filed an anonymous report to the Financial Markets Authority. From there it moved to the SFO itself, which meant Callum's own colleagues were investigating him. 6 weeks from report to arrest. He paused. I need you to understand how deliberate it was, Dad. This wasn't something he thought of when the money came up. He had begun building the structure before he asked Nadia to marry him. That sentence landed like something thrown through a closed window. Before he proposed, Phillip Stroud had been engineering the destruction of my son's career and freedom as a preliminary condition of marrying my daughter. He had sat at my kitchen table and looked me in the eye and asked for her hand while a plan was already running. I sat with that and said nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "After you got out. After you went back. Why did I have to find out in a locked study? At 1 in the morning. Callum looked at me for the first time since he'd started talking. "Because you would have gone to Nadia." Silence. "And Nadia would have confronted Phillip." More silence. "And Phillip would have run," I said. "Or burned the evidence. Or worse." Callum's voice was steady. "He has connections to the compliance officer, to the legal secretary, to at least one other person we haven't fully named yet. If he'd felt the investigation closing in before we were ready, people would have been hurt. I needed him to believe he had won. I needed him comfortable and arrogant and making mistakes." "The wallet," I said. He almost smiled. "He accessed the house once before. 3 years ago. At Easter. Nadia mentioned you'd given them a key for when they visited. We picked up an anomaly in the timing he arrived 3 hours before Nadia did on the Saturday. We couldn't get into the property to confirm what he was doing without triggering him. So we waited for him to come back. You used my house as bait. I used his confidence as bait. Your house was just where his confidence was stored. I wanted to be angry. I tried it on, felt its weight. It didn't fit right, because underneath the locked study and the lamb chops and the good whiskey, and the 19 months of driving to Rimutaka and sitting across a table from my son, in a room that smelled like nothing should smell underneath all of it, was something I hadn't expected to feel. Pride. Clean and uncomplicated. My boy had done this the right way. "What happens now?" I asked. Callum reached into the folder and passed me a sheet of paper. An event listing, printed from a community website. I held it up to the window light. Hawke's Bay Business Leaders Dinner. Friday, 20th June, Napier War Memorial Centre. Guest of honor. Stroud Capital Group. I looked at my son. "Phillip is being recognized," Callum said, "for his contribution to regional investment. He's giving a speech. There's a table of 12. Nadia's going. So is a journalist from the Hawke's Bay Today that Phillip has been cultivating for 6 months. And a regional councillor. He's been lobbying on a development proposal." Callum took the paper back and slid it into the folder with the care of someone handling something that belongs to history. "We're going to let him reach the lectern," he said. "And then we end it." I looked out at my street. My quince trees. My house. My windows dark. "Vera's coming," I said. "Isn't she?" Callum looked at me sideways. "She arrives Thursday afternoon. She's been helping us verify the estate records. She remembers specifics about Mum's will, the conversation about the $12,000 bequest, the specific phrase Mum used when she talked about it that we couldn't reconstruct from paperwork alone." I thought about Vera. 71 years old, sharp as a tack, has never once in her life let something go, if she thought it mattered. Robin used to say she was the most relentless person in their entire family. Robin, as usual, had been right. "Go get some rest, Dad," Callum said. "Friday's going to be a long night." I got out of the car, stood on the footpath in my slippers in the Hawke's Bay winter, looked back at him through the window. "Dom," I said, then caught myself. "Callum." He looked up. "She knew, didn't she? Your mother. She knew there was something wrong with Phillip." He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he put the car in drive. "Get some sleep, Dad." He pulled away before I could ask again. Maybe that was its own answer. I walked back inside, past the needlepoint. A house is built with timber and stone. A home is built with love alone. Stood in the kitchen in the winter dark. Somewhere down the hall, Philip Stroud was in my spare room, sleeping the sleep of a man who believed he'd arranged everything correctly. On Friday, he'd be standing at a lectern accepting applause. I was going to be in the room, and this time I wasn't making anyone lamb chops. I woke up on Wednesday morning and made myself a full breakfast. Eggs, toast, tea, 2 sugars. My mother's rule. Never do anything that matters on an empty stomach. She was a practical woman. I have tried to be the same. Philip came through at 8:30 in his dressing gown, looking entirely untroubled, and asked if there was bread for toast. I said yes, and pointed to the bench. He stood at my toaster, Robin's toaster, the good one she bought at the Hastings market. Because she said the cheap ones burned the edges, and scrolled his phone with the ease of a man who had all the time in the world. Which he believed he did. "Big week," he said without looking up. I turned from the bench and looked at him. "Busy," I said. "The dinner Friday night." He finally looked up. "I've been asked to say a few words. Regional investment, impact on SMEs, that sort of thing. Should be a good room." He said it the way he said everything, polished, easy. The kind of delivery that sounds spontaneous and isn't. "I'll be there," I said. Something moved across his face. Just a quarter second. The flicker of a man who registered something he didn't have a category for. Then it was gone, and the ease came back. "Brilliant," he said. "Should be a great night." He finished his toast and went back down the hall, and I stood at the bench and held my tea with both hands. Great, I thought. That's one word for it. The Napier War Memorial Centre sits at the edge of the Marine Parade, and on a clear Hawke's Bay evening, it looks out over water the color of pewter. It's the kind of venue that makes even ordinary occasions feel like they have weight. Dark carpet, high ceilings, the smell of catering and old ceremony. Philip had chosen well. He always chose well. That was the point of him. I arrived at 6:40. Callum had said to be early. The room was filling. I found the reserved tables near the right side of the main floor. Long table, 12 chairs, name cards in small pewter holders that matched the room. I checked mine. Mr. Bernard Holt. Placed, I noted, with a clear sightline to the lectern. I sat down and ordered water and waited. Vera arrived at 6:53 in a dark red jacket that Robin would have said was exactly the right choice. She spotted me from the door, crossed the room at the pace of a woman who has never been in a hurry, because she has never needed to be, and sat down beside me without ceremony. She put her hand over mine once. "Film. Brief. You holding up?" she asked. "Ask me at 9 o'clock, I said. She almost smiled. Robin would have had the seating plan rearranged by now. Robin, I said, would have already spoken to the event coordinator and the catering manager and probably the parking attendant outside. That got a real smile. Small, sad, true. The table filled steadily. 2 colleagues from Philip's firm, people I'd met at Nadia's birthday 3 years back, pleasant enough, completely unaware of what they'd walked into. A regional counselor whose name I recognized from the local paper. The journalist young woman, notebook already on the table, the kind of professional attentiveness that looks casual and isn't. And then Nadia. She came in with Philip, laughing at something he'd said as they crossed the room. She was wearing a dark navy wrap dress and her mother's small pearl earrings, and she looked, this was the part I'd known would be hardest, she looked happy. Easy, the kind of settled that takes years to build. That was going to make the next few hours considerably more complicated. Philip worked the table. He had a gift for it. He remembered names and used them. He asked the counselor about a local issue by its specific technical name. He found the journalist's published work without having been told to look. He poured wine before it needed to be poured. He was the kind of man who made rooms feel managed without anyone noticing they were being managed. He found me at the far end of the table, raised his glass slightly. I raised mine. Enjoy the speech, I thought. The entrees came. The bread rolls. The conversation settled into the warmth of a room that believed it was simply celebrating something straightforward. The counselor was telling a story about a development proposal. Philip's colleague was asking Vera about Dunedin. Nadia was talking to the journalist about something I couldn't hear, leaning forward the way she does when she's genuinely interested. I checked my phone under the table. A message from Callum. 5 minutes. I set the phone face down. Beside me, Vera had gone very still. The main course arrived. Philip had risen to speak. Not the formal address yet. Just a remark about the wine. A toast to the evening. The kind of warmth that rooms like this one respond to. He had a glass in his hand and an audience that was already with him. He was mid-sentence about regional growth corridors when the main doors opened. Callum walked in. He was in a suit. Navy. White shirt. No tie. Behind him were 2 people I didn't know. A man in a gray jacket, a woman in a dark blazer, and they moved through the room with the particular quality of people who carry authority quietly and don't require anyone's attention to exercise it. The room didn't stop at once. A table near the entrance went quiet first, then the table beside them. Then the journalist looked up from her notebook with an expression that shifted from professional interest to something sharper and more alert. Philip had his back to the doors. Nadia saw Callum first. Her face opened. Cal. Oh, I didn't know you were. I thought you were in Wellington this week. And then she saw the 2 people behind him. And her voice went the way a radio signal goes when it crosses a hill. Not cut off. Faded. Callum walked the length of that room without looking at anyone but Philip. Philip turned. The way a man turns when he has heard something he can't name, and has, in the same instant, named it completely. The composed man. The man who had sat across my table and looked me in the eye 11 years running. He looked at my son, and for one pure moment, one unguarded, expensive, truthful moment, I watched everything he had constructed simply leave his face. There you are, I thought. That's who you actually are. Callum stopped 2 meters from him. Philip Gerald Stroud. Quiet. Controlled. Even now. You are being detained for questioning in relation to charges of fraud, misappropriation of estate assets, and obtaining by deception. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used in evidence. The table became stone. Philip's voice, when it came, had found something. A surface. Thin, but real. What is this? This is a private function. This is a professional engagement. Callum, whatever you think, I have the original will. Your wife's mother's real will, witnessed and dated. With the solicitor's notation on the back. Philip said nothing. I have the estate document that went to probate, with the substituted pages. I have the financial record connecting the payment to the legal secretary at Fenton and Gregg to a trust registered in your mother's name. I have records of the transactions used to construct the fraud charge against me. And I have the compliance officer from Wellington who sends his regards from his current location, which is the Central Police Station. Philip opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The woman in the blazer moved forward, with the steadiness of someone who does this as a matter of course, and Philip Stroud stood up from a table, at which he had been about to receive applause for his contribution to regional investment, and he stood up in the Napier War Memorial Centre in front of a journalist with a notebook and a regional councillor and his wife's aunt and his wife's father. And he looked down the length of that table. He looked at me. Just me. For a long moment, as if he was doing a final piece of accounting. I looked back at him, and I did not move, and I did not speak, and I did not look away. I just held his gaze and let him read in it whatever he needed to read. You sat at my table, I thought. You drank my whiskey. You ate the food I cooked. You slept in the room where my children stayed as children. You put my son in a cage for 19 months. You took what my wife left for him. You looked me in the eye every time and smiled like I was the one who didn't understand the room. I understood the room. He was walked to the doors. He did not fight. Whatever else Philip Stroud was, He was not the kind of man who made scenes when the scene was already lost. At the doors, he paused. He looked back at Nadia. She was sitting with both hands flat on the tablecloth, looking at the name card in front of her. Her own name, in the pewter holder, surrounded by the flowers she had helped choose. She did not look up. He walked out. The room stayed very quiet. Then a glass touched a plate somewhere. Gently. And the world remembered how to move. Callum came back to the table. He did not sit in his own chair. He sat in Phillip's, at the head, and he looked at his sister. "I'm sorry," he said. "I am so sorry I couldn't tell you." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dry. She was Robin's daughter. "How long?" she asked. 9 years building it. 8 months with enough to move. She processed that the way she processes most things. Efficiently, internally, without display. "Mum's real will," she said. "Yes, my share is what she intended. Equal. All of it. Vera's bequest as well." Nadia looked down the table at Vera. Something passed between them, in the way things pass between women who have known each other across a lifetime of family gatherings and grief and ordinary Tuesdays. An entire conversation without a word. Then she looked at me. "Dad," she said. Just that. One word. And her voice came apart on it cleanly. The way Robin's used to when something genuinely moved her. I got up from my end of the table and I went to her and I put my arms around her and she held on with both hands the way she used to when she was small and something had frightened her and she wasn't going to admit it. "I've got you," I said. "I've always had you." She cried for 30 seconds, quietly. Then she straightened, smoothed the front of her dress, and looked at the untouched main course in front of her. "Is the food any good here?" she asked. I stared at her. "Sorry? The food. I booked this venue because the reviews were excellent, but I've never actually eaten here, and I would genuinely like to eat something." I looked at Callum. He looked at Vera. Vera was already turning to flag the waiter, and we ate. 3 weeks later, I came downstairs on a Thursday morning and made tea and stood at the kitchen window watching the quince trees. The June cold had gone hard overnight. Frost on the grass. Timata Peak clear and sharp against a pale sky. On the desk in my study was a folder. Plain brown cardboard. Inside it was a document I had read 4 times in the past week and intended to read again. A certified copy of Robin's original will, her actual words, her actual intentions, not the version that had been constructed to serve someone else's interests, the version she'd signed with shaking hands on a Wednesday afternoon because she wanted to be certain that the people she loved would be looked after when she no longer could. I pressed my hand flat on the folder. "Got him, love," I said to the kitchen, to the needlepoint on the wall, to the woman who said I'd hear a feather land on cotton wool. Took us a while, but we got him. The tea finished steeping. Outside, a tui landed in the quince tree and made the kind of noise that sounds like it has an argument to win. I poured my cup, sat at the kitchen table, Robin's table, the one we bought together at a market in Hastings, the year we moved in, and for the first time in 9 years, the morning felt like it was supposed to. There are things I have thought about in the weeks since that evening that I didn't expect to think about. Not about Phillip, he will face the process now, and the process is thorough, and I have enough faith in it to leave it there. What I've thought about is the quieter things. The years of Sunday dinners where something was wrong in the room, and I told myself I was imagining it. The way Nadia used to defer to him on questions that should have been hers to answer. The way Callum sat across from me in that prison visiting room and never once, in 19 months, told me he knew who had put him there. He knew. He knew from the beginning. But knowing without proof is just pain, with nowhere to go. That is perhaps the first thing I would say to anyone listening. The truth doesn't arrive when you need it. It arrives when the work has been done to find it. And sometimes the person doing that work cannot tell you they are doing it. Because the moment they do, the thing they are reaching for disappears. Trust is earned across time, not declared in a single moment. Phillip Stroud knew that. He used it as a tool. The lesson isn't that trust is dangerous, it's that genuine trust and performed trust eventually stop looking the same if you pay close enough attention. If you're willing to sit in the dark and wait for the sensor light to come on. The second thing I would say is about patience, not the passive kind. Callum was not passive for 9 years. He was deliberate. He built something carefully, the way his mother built her savings, not quickly, not dramatically, but consistently, with a clear idea of what it was for. There is a kind of patience that looks like defeat from the outside. It isn't. It's just working at a pace that the other person can't see. And the third thing, the one I find hardest to say out loud, Nadia loved Phillip. I believe that fully. And Phillip, I don't know what he felt, or whether what he felt qualifies as love by any standard I understand. But my daughter is not a fool. And she is not weak. And the fact that she was deceived does not say anything true about her. It says something true about him, about the particular skill of people who understand how trust works and decide to use that understanding as a mechanism rather than a foundation. She will be all right. She is Robin's daughter, which means she is more resilient than she appears, and more stubborn than is convenient, and better at quiet mornings than she knows. She called me last Saturday. Said she was coming down for the weekend, bringing scones. I said I'd put the kettle on. Some of what gets taken from us gets returned. Not always in the form we expected. Not always at the time we needed it. But the work of honest people, done with patience and with care, has a way of finding its way back to where it was supposed to go. My wife believed that. I am still learning to. If these stories matter to you, if you've sat with this one and felt something true in it, then please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below. Every story here exists because people like you keep showing up. And that, as it turns out, is more than enough reason to keep going.